Welcome to our listeners. Thank you for joining this podcast from Argus, a leading provider of energy and commodity price benchmarks and market intelligence. We track and discuss the markets and prices that move our world. My name is Jade Delafraye, and I am the head of the Global Agriculture team here at Argus. My colleague Nathalia Giannetti joins me today to discuss the launch of new corn port differentials for the Brazilian ports of Barcarena and Itaqui. These prices are published daily in the Argus Agri-Markets report, which focuses on global grains, oilseeds, veg oils, and oilseed meal markets. Our fundamentals forecasts and balance sheets are presented in our Agri-Markets Outlook service on a weekly and monthly basis. So, let's get to it. Nathalia, thanks so much for joining me on this podcast. I'm really excited to discuss these new assessments. And my first question to you is, why is the assessment of port differentials in the Barcarena and Itaqui ports so important?
Thank you, Jade. So, to answer your question, Brazil is the world's third largest corn producer and second largest exporter. As Brazil represents an important share of the international corn market, Argus has been publishing prices for the Santos Tubarao market for many years now. The Port of Santos is the largest Brazilian port and accounted for half of the volumes exported nationally back in 2020. But in recent years, the region known as the Northern Arc has grown exponentially and exported more corn than Santos since 2022. It covers ports or transshipment points in the states of Amapá, Amazonas, Pará, Rondônia, and Maranhão. The largest ports there are the Itaqui port in Maranhão and the Barcarena port in Pará. Itaqui and Barcarena alone account for more than half of the corn shipments in the Northern Arc. The Santos, Barcarena, and Itaqui ports account for around 60% of the Brazilian corn exports. So monitoring these port differentials brings a more complete view of the negotiations in the Brazilian export market. Argus publishes prices for the July to January settlements in the Santos Tubarão cargo market, which corresponds to the window for Brazilian corn exports. And for the Barcarena Itaqui cargo market, prices are published for the August and September settlements, which is when exports peak.
I see. What is the reason for this growth in the Northern Arc then?
Well, Jade, a great advantage in the Northern Arc ports is their proximity to the Brazil's central-western region, which is the main corn-producing hub in Brazil and home to the Mato Grosso state. Mato Grosso is the largest corn producer in the country and accounted for around 38% of the national crop in the last 5 years. The proximity between the Northern Arc and this important region shortens transportation time and logistical costs to the export market.
Right, I can see why it would be a much more convenient location then. Thanks so much for explaining that, Nathalia. And does the distance between the Northern Arc ports and the buyers also play a role in this?
It does. Their location is also strategic for shipping corn to Europe and Africa. Countries from these two continents, such as Spain, Algeria, Egypt, and Morocco, are important buyers of Brazilian corn. In 2024, Egypt received 14% of Brazilian corn shipments, according to the National Association of Cereal Exporters, ANEC. This equates to a record 5.3 million metric tons, making Egypt the country with the largest share of shipments in the year. Itaqui and Barcarena accounted for more than 65% of the volumes received by Egypt last year.
Interesting, Nathalia. I imagine that the Santos port you mentioned earlier has some of these advantages as well?
That's correct, Jade. It is important to note that the Santos port is the largest in Brazil and has accounted for half of the corn volumes exported nationally until the decade began. Currently, its share has fallen to at least 37% on the year, but the Santos port remains the port with the highest share in national shipments, as the Northern Arc has 4 major ports for corn exports. The Santos port is located in the southeast, which borders the center-west. So this proximity with the largest grain producer is a key factor for the relevance of the Santos port. Southeastern and southern ports are also the best option for shipments to Asia because of a shorter sea route to the continent. China, Vietnam, Iran, Japan, and South Korea are some of the main buyers of Brazilian corn. These countries together account for 46% of volumes purchased by the international market since 2022.
And am I right in thinking that China has only quite recently become a major importer of Brazilian corn?
Exactly, Jad. China and Brazil signed in 2022 a sanitary agreement that authorized Brazilian corn shipments to China. China jumped from no share to 31% of Brazilian corn exports in 2023, but volumes fell to just 6% last year.
What about 2025 then? Is Chinese demand for Brazilian corn set to grow once again?
It is difficult to know what are China's next steps, but some market participants expect shipments to intensify with the return of Donald Trump to the US presidency, which may change the trade flows between the US and China. Brazil would be the top alternative for corn purchases alongside Argentina.
Understood. And definitely we've covered quite a lot this topic of China's feed grains imports. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. We'll continue to cover in agri markets. Now, back to Brazil. Are there any projections already for Brazil's corn exports in 2025?
There are. As of now, Brazil should export less corn in this crop than in the last season, despite the forecast of a larger production. The National Supply Company, CONAB, estimates that Brazil will produce 94.6 million metric tons in the second corn crop. That is the largest of the three crops produced by Brazil and the one Brazil exports. CONAB expects corn exports to total 34 million tons between February 2025 and January 2026. So 36% of the national production of the second corn crop would go to the export market. In the last season, shipments totaled 43% of the national production. The 23-24 crop produced 90.3 million metric tons and exported 38.5 million metric tons, according to CONAB.
Is it correct to say that this reduction in exported corn from Brazil is happening because of the expectation that domestic demand will reach a record this year?
Exactly. The animal feed and corn ethanol industries are growing and reached already a record production and corn consumption in 2024. Most of the corn purchases in the second half of last year were from these two sectors, according to market participants. Producers preferred to sell to the domestic industry because of the higher prices offered by the national buyers.
So the trend for 2025 is for the domestic market to continue paying a premium over exports and acquiring most of the stocks?
At this first moment, you can say so, but the international corn market is set to face a tighter supply-demand balance season. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that the global corn demand will surpass production by around 20 million tons. The main corn importers will have to compete more aggressively when it comes to negotiating shipments. This may lead to an increase in prices paid at ports, so the port differentials, which we cover here at Argus.
Thank you for sharing these market insights, Nathalia. Really, really interesting to hear about it. Let's continue to monitor these developments in the Brazilian corn market with the Santos Tubarao and the Barcarena Itaqui prices published daily in the Argus Agri-Markets report. Thank you all for tuning in.